In the news this week, the link between politics and climate change. Expert urged fundamental changes and claims serious consequences in a new book.
Western Australia gets back to business as Stage 3 kicks in, but recovery may take time.
It's not just America. The homegrown Black Lives Matter protests happening here.
And on Western Perspective, how the arts community in WA is transforming itself in order to adapt to the new normal.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Lowe and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. The link between political institutions and belief in climate change has led to confusion. Questions over the fate of the world continues to polarise our community. There's never been a better time to think about how we want to move forward following the pandemic. Dr. Ian Cook's new book has done just that. Taylor Hannah discussed these issues further in an exclusive one-on-one interview.
In a nutshell, could you explain what your book is about, please?
Well, basically, I've just followed the science that's coming out of climate science and looked at the sorts of views that some of them have about the sort of future we're looking at. So I took a sort of what I call the near worst case scenario and just applied it to, in part, how we got there, but also, what we're looking at in terms of, the next 10, 20 and then sort of 50 years.
How has politics played a role in the climate change debate?
Well, it's been absolutely powerful in terms of people's positions. What determines people's views about climate change is not evidence, it's their political leanings. So in the US, Republicans are much more likely to be sceptical. In Australia, Liberal Party supporters are much more likely to be sceptical than Labor or Green supporters. So politics has had a really fundamental role in creating the sort of confusion in people's minds around the science, because climate scientists are not in disagreement. They are 97 to 100% in agreement of the future that they're talking about is real. Their only disagreement is how quickly it will happen and what will happen exactly. So there's no doubt. And what we've seen is when people are told that scientists don't have any doubt, they start to change their own views because they think scientists are confused, that scientists have different positions on it, but they don't. Why do they think that? They think that because politicians have led them to believe that scientists don't agree. And that's just not true.
Do you think fear is what's going to hold us back sort of from progressing past all these issues?
I think partly what I was saying, it's such a big problem, it's such a difficult problem. It's one that it happens slowly and it doesn't have easy sort of answers in terms of who's causing it and how do we address it. And so I think it's uncertainty rather than fear that's sort of driving what's going on. Perhaps, the only thing that people are afraid of is the level of change that's going to be necessary.
A lot of people will sort of hear these claims that you're making in your book and sort of think they're a little bit unrealistic, and they might think that you're a little bit crazy. What do you make of those comments?
Well, that's fair enough. The book started when I started reading the science. It started when I knew things weren't great. I knew, but I didn't know quite what the data was showing and what sort of inferences scientists were drawing from that. So this started, I wasn't interested in climate before I got into this. It was sort of accidental as to, that I started reading this stuff. And the more I read and the more I studied of it, the more obvious the problem was to me. And, and I had to stop and say, well, look, it might not exactly happen, but the level of risk that people are dealing with just now, the sort of risk people are taking, climate scientists might be wrong, but if they're not, then what I'm saying is exactly the future we're looking at. So the people out there who think I'm crazy better be crossing their fingers really hard and hoping that climate scientists have got it wrong. And my sense is that's a really ridiculous hope.
Stage 3 restrictions have come into full force this weekend and business begins to ramp back up. What will the new stage of restrictions look like? How will our economy be affected? And how long can young people expect to wait for recovery? Helene Fung reports.
Premier Mark McGowan urged people to get out and explore WA as restrictions eased this weekend.
I'm looking forward to getting out there, going to cafes and restaurants, having a meal and a drink in Rockingham, where I live, and I know many people across the community are looking at the same.
Gyms, cinemas and beauty salons get the green light to get back to business, and regional travel is back on the menu throughout the state. One restaurant owner says it's the easing of social distancing restrictions that will make the greatest difference to his business.
Yeah, that's more easy for me because we don't need that far to table.
Certified financial planner Elson Goh says pre-existing weaknesses in the economy on top of the financial pain of COVID may mean a slower recovery.
There's quite a lot of people either unemployed or looking for work. Now, going forward, that's going to be a slow progress where companies are going to start thinking about hiring new people.
Elson says people should expect to wait some time before things get back to normal.
If you look at the last global financial crisis, from peak to trough, it was about 18 months. So it's quite a long, drawn-out process.
Helene Fong, WAMN News.
As the Black Lives Matter protests continue around America, similar rallies in Australia highlight the unacceptable number of deaths of Indigenous Australians in custody.
Aboriginal activist Mervyn Eads called for an independent Aboriginal commissioner to work alongside investigations, providing accountability for their people. Mr. Eads says the police needs to be held accountable for their actions.
Independent to the police department and all state departments. It's got to be independent to everyone because too many of our people have died in custody and some of the deaths have been brutal murders, really brutal murders, and no one's ever been made accountable. In the history of deaths in custody in Australia, no one in the prison department or in the police department has ever been convicted of any crime against our people as far as deaths in custody, and that needs to stop.
Mandurah detectives are appealing for public help to catch a pair of armed home invaders that left 2 men in hospital last month. On April the 13th, 2 armed and masked men forced entry into homes in Kudanup and Middle Springs. Several shots were fired during the altercation, which saw a 41-year-old man stabbed and a 36-year-old assaulted. The thugs fled the scene on foot, smashing windows on parked cars. Anyone with information is urged to call Crime Stoppers.
And it's quite possible that the noise of the incidents carried into the streets, and we're just seeking anyone who thought they heard or saw anything suspicious to come forward and let us know that information.
The WA Greens claim an engineering assessment of WA's unused Tier 3 rail lines could support the reinstatement of the rail service. The Rail, Tram and Bus Union's WA branch campaigned for state and federal governments to reopen the lines that were closed by the former Barnett government. The union garnered support from the WA Greens to investigate impacts. WA Greens Southwest MLC Diane Evers says that it was time to bring back the longer-term benefits of using the rail networks.
The issue here is whether we transport all of our grain on rail or on trucks. And the argument has been going back and forth for some time, and I see this as a positive step to possibly getting more of our freight infrastructure, freight transport back on rail.
The former WA home of football, Subiaco Oval, will be open to the community for the first time in decades. Members of the public will be able to use the playing service alongside Bob Hawke College, with access to features including original player dugouts, grandstand seats and AFL goalposts. The state government says they're giving the Oval back to the community as a much-loved piece of Perth's history.
And the children that go to the school already have now access to Subiaco Oval, and now we're handing it back to the community. And also, I think we'll also see the Football League and junior football being a major user of this facility.
Former US President Barack Obama has called for a review into police departments' use of force policies as the unrest caused by George Floyd's death continues to rattle America. In further developments this week, 3 other officers who were involved in the incident were also arrested and charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder. Thousands of people poured onto the streets in Hong Kong this week to commemorate the 31st anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. The candlelit vigil was held despite police opposition. Chants called for a democratic China and the end to single-party rule. The vigil follows China's passing of the national security legislation, laws that many critics are concerned may erode democracy in Hong Kong.
Perth Zoo is back in business this week and has a lot of new faces to see. The 122-year-old zoo has had a baby boom whilst being shut down for COVID-19. Some of the new occupants include otter pups, squirrel monkey babies, emperor tamarin infants and more than 50 tortoises. Some Australian natives will be on show as well. The zoo's koala and tree kangaroo joeys are now ready to meet the world and sticking their head out of their mother's pouches.
That's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website and social media pages.
No matter where you're watching, look after yourself, stay at home and have a pleasant evening.
Take care.